They tied me to a pole with silver streamers and duct tape. At my best friend's birthday party, my arms were bound tight behind me, wrists bruising against the cold metal, as I stood like a spectacle in the center of the backyard. Laughter exploded from every direction, sharp, merciless, high-pitched hyena laughs that echoed in my skull. One of the girls, dressed in a glittery tube top and platform heels she could barely walk in, pointed at me and squealed, a toast to the charity case, the one who showed up with a thrift store dress to my party. The crowd roared, and there I stood, humiliated, helpless, shaking, not because I was scared, but because I knew something they didn't, because they thought I was a nobody, and I had let them believe that. I clenched my jaw so tight, I thought I might crack a molar. The birthday lights blinked above me in mock celebration. Music thumped through the ground beneath my heels. Everyone had their phones out, recording, laughing, zooming in. I stared at them all, the girls who had pretended to be my friends, the guys who had flirted with me just for fun, the drunk teens tossing red cups into the air like confetti. They had no idea, and I didn't beg, not once, because I wasn't going to walk away from this. I was going to rise, and when I did, the entire damn world would hear the sound of their laughter die in their throats. But just before that happened, something else occurred that silenced everyone, something none of them could have expected. My father showed up, and he didn't come quietly. It started with headlights, sharp, blinding beams slicing through the dark. A black car, matte finish, low to the ground, purring like a panther, rolled up onto the lawn like it belonged there. People blinked and turned, shielding their eyes. Some squinted, trying to see past the glare. Then the door opened, and out stepped a man no one could forget. Black tailored suit, silver cufflinks that shimmered under the string lights. He walked with purpose, not the kind of swagger these rich boys practiced in the mirror, but the kind that comes from power so deep, it's not even spoken aloud. Dad! The word slipped out of me, small and raw, before I could stop it. He didn't look at me. Not yet. His eyes scanned the crowd like a predator assessing prey. The music stopped. Someone had the sense to turn it off. Then, in a voice so calm it sliced through the air like ice, he asked, "Who tied my daughter to a pole?" No one spoke. Not a damn soul. Because they had all seen his face before. Not here, no. But in headlines. Business panels. International summits. He was Roman Devereux. The man who built an empire out of nothing but ruthless smarts and silence. And no one knew he was my father. Because I never told them. Because I didn't want to be treated differently. And now, their silence was deafening. He stepped forward. The crowd parted like water. Some stepped back. Some held their breath. Some tried to look away but couldn't. Roman reached me, his eyes finally meeting mine. There was a quiet fury there, but something else too. Pride. He didn't rush. He pulled a blade from his coat pocket, silver, slim, elegant, and sliced through the duct tape like it was paper. My arms fell free. And then he did something that no one expected. He didn't lecture me. He didn't scream. He took off his coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. Then he turned to the crowd and said, "She gave all of you a chance to know her, and you used it to humiliate her. I raised her to fight battles, not beg for mercy." He paused, eyes locking with the birthday girl, a girl named Brooke who once cried to me about her father cheating on her mother, who once said I was the only person who understood her. "You just tied your last rope," my father said, and his voice was a growl now, full of something so cold it made the night air feel like summer. "I'll be sending lawyers in the morning." Brooke's face turned white. People started to murmur, but Dad raised one hand, a gesture so subtle it was more powerful than shouting. "Leave," he said, "all of you." And they did. Like frightened children caught in a room they didn't belong in. I didn't speak until we were alone, until the backyard was nothing but wind and silence. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "You didn't call me. I didn't want to bring you into it." I whispered. My voice was still hoarse. "You're my daughter, Alina." He said my name like it was a vow. There is no end to it. I am it. And then, finally, I let myself break. I collapsed into his arms, and he held me, not as a billionaire, not as a tycoon feared by CEOs and prime ministers, but as a father. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel small. I felt safe. The next morning, I woke up in a bed that felt unfamiliar, only because it had been so long since I'd allowed myself to come back here. Thick sheets, mahogany furniture, Windows so tall the sunrise painted the entire wall in gold. Home. The Devereux estate. But I wasn't the same girl who had once lived here, tiptoeing around marble floors and boardroom conversations. That girl had left. She'd gone to college insisting she didn't want to live in anyone's shadow. She'd wanted to prove she could build her own life, earn her friendships, find meaning, not just be his daughter. But that world had spit her out and tied her to a pole. And now, I was done playing nice. Downstairs, the staff gave warm nods and murmured, "Welcome home, Miss Alina," as I passed, not a single ounce of judgment in their eyes. Only something else. Respect. But it was nothing compared to what waited in the drawing room. Dad sat in his leather armchair, reading the Financial Times like nothing had happened. But the second I stepped in, he folded it and looked up. "You hungry?" "Depends," I said, arms crossed. "Are we going to pretend I wasn't duct taped to a pole last night?" One side of his mouth lifted, the ghost of a smirk. "No, we're going to make sure it never happens again." "Ow!" He stood, walked to a cabinet, poured 2 glasses of something golden, juice for me, whiskey for him. Then he said the words that made my breath catch. "I'm giving you access to your trust early." I blinked. "What? You wanted to live like them," he said, voice steady. "They showed you who they really are. Now it's time they see who you are." My pulse hammered in my ears. "You're serious?" He nodded once. "I've waited for you to come into your own. I think last night lit the match." I didn't speak, because something was changing inside me. Not greed, not revenge for revenge's sake, but clarity. By noon, Brooke's social media had gone dark. Not because she wanted to lay low, but because her father's company, the one holding contracts under Devereux Global, suddenly found itself in breach of clauses they hadn't even known existed. Lawyers circle like hawks. Meanwhile, I made one call. "Hey," I said to the woman who picked up on the other end. "Remember when you said you hated how Brooke treated you at work?" "HLO. Yeah." "Alina." "Yes. I want to offer you a job." "Wait, what?" "Double your current salary. Full benefits. Starting tomorrow." Silence. Then the woman broke down crying. It wasn't even personal. I barely knew her. But I remembered. She was always kind to me. She once gave me a granola bar when she saw I hadn't eaten all day. I never forgot that. Because kindness, even when quiet, leaves a mark. And now, it was time to reward it. 3 days later, I showed up to another party. This one downtown, luxury rooftop, dripping with overpriced perfume and fake smiles. I wore a black dress that cost more than most people's cars, and I didn't have to borrow it. I walked in alone. I didn't need anyone by my side, because this time, they moved aside when they saw me. Brooke stood near the bar, her face pale, her posture stiff. Her group had shrunk, a few people still clinging on, but no more laughter, no more dominance. I walked up to her, calm, composed. "Hi, Brooke." She turned, eyes already wide. "Alina, I didn't know that I was a billionaire's daughter." She flinched. "I never needed to be," I said. "I just needed to be treated like a human being." "I was drunk. You were cruel." Silence. Around us, the music thudded, but the air between us was frozen. She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said. "I came to tell you something important." She blinked. "You don't have to fear me. You don't have to fear my father. But you do have to live with the fact that when someone gave you a chance to be decent, you chose the rope." And with that, I turned and walked away. The whispers started the next day, about the silent heiress who took down an entire legacy with a single phone call, about how I refused to press charges, about how I offered scholarships at our university to students who had been bullied or mocked for their background. That part wasn't even about revenge. That was about me, making something better out of what they tried to break. That night, Dad walked into the kitchen and handed me a folder. "What's this?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "The board wants you on it." My throat went dry. "You're serious?" "You earned it," he said. "The real way. Through fire." I didn't cry. Not until later. Not until I was alone in my room, staring out over the city, and finally realized they tied me to a pole to make me feel small. But in doing so, they handed me the very fire I needed to stand taller than ever. It started with a strange silence at breakfast. Dad was usually sharp, always scanning headlines or talking to his legal team. But today, he just sipped his coffee, jaw clenched, eyes locked on his phone. Something wrong. I asked. He slid the phone across the table. My blood ran cold. It was an email, sent from my personal address, one I never wrote, leaking internal Devereux documents. And the signature? Alina Devereux. By noon, lawyers were everywhere. PR teams scrambled. Board members called, demanding answers. The headlines were spreading like wildfire. Billionaire's daughter leaks her own empire? But I didn't flinch, because I knew it wasn't me. Someone had framed me. Someone close. The security team dug into the logs. Access had been made from inside the estate. And when they checked the fingerprint logs, only one matched mine, and one matched someone I trusted. My cousin Riley. Riley had been like a sister. She lived with us for a year when her parents divorced. We shared rooms, secrets, dreams. But now she sat across from me in the drawing room, her expression hard. What? I asked, voice shaking. You got everything, she said coldly. The name, the power, the father who actually gave a damn. And what did you do with it? You ran off to be poor on purpose. Tears stung my eyes. Not because I was afraid, because betrayal from the outside is one thing. But betrayal from family? That cuts deeper. I didn't run off. I whispered. I wanted to become someone real. I never wanted to be treated special. That's the difference between us. She stood, jaw clenched. You're soft. I stood too, taller now. No, I'm strong enough to still choose kindness. And I did. I didn't press charges. But I had her removed from the estate. Cut off. Dad watched me quietly. You didn't need to show mercy, he said. I didn't do it for her, I replied. I did it for me. That night, I sat at the garden's edge, watching the lights shimmer across the city skyline. One of the maids approached, an older woman who'd worked for us for decades. She handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. You didn't eat dinner, she said gently. I smiled through the weight in my chest. Thank you, Marta. And that's when I remembered. Kindness doesn't need cameras. It just needs people willing to give, even when the world is cruel. I could feel every eye on me the second I stepped onto the red carpet of the Devereux Foundation Gala. This wasn't just another event. This was the night people came to be seen, to be talked about, to climb higher than the people next to them. And I was about to set the whole damn ladder on fire. I didn't wear a flashy dress, no diamond necklace, no designer purse screaming for attention. Just a sleek black gown with a low back and sharp shoulders, the kind that whispered power instead of begging for it. Is that her? Someone muttered behind me. That's her, right? The girl from the video. Yeah, that girl. The one who got duct taped to a pole and humiliated for sport. But now I was the storm walking into the ballroom. Inside, everything glittered. Gold chandeliers, champagne flutes, small talk dripping with insincerity. It smelled like expensive perfume and hidden secrets. I walked past dozens of people who had either ignored me or pitied me when I was pretending to be one of them. Just not enough of one. Now they all froze, because they knew who I really was. And they'd mocked a Devereux. The stage was already set for my speech. My name on the projector, Alina Devereux, special address. I took the mic, looked out over the sea of suits and smiles. And I didn't hold back. I came to this city trying to build something for myself. Without my last name. Without the money. Just me. The room stayed quiet. Some of you befriended me. Some of you used me. Some of you tied me to a pole and laughed while I stood there in silence. A ripple of discomfort. People shifting in their seats. Thing is, I could have lashed out. Destroyed reputations. But I didn't. I waited. I listened. And now, I choose something better. I scanned the crowd and let my eyes land on Brooke, standing near the center table in a champagne-colored dress that couldn't distract from the panic in her face. I didn't name her. Didn't need to. I let her squirm in the silence she created. I don't believe in revenge, I said slowly, but I do believe in justice. I believe in showing the world that cruelty is weakness wearing a pretty dress. I let that sink in. Tonight, I'm announcing a new initiative through the Devereux Foundation. We're opening mental health support and legal aid for bullied teens. For anyone who's ever been humiliated for being less. For anyone who was ever tied to a pole while everyone watched and did nothing. Now the crowd erupted, not with pity, but with thunderous applause. Because even those who hadn't wronged me, they knew what I said wasn't just personal. It was universal. After the speech, I stepped off stage and slipped onto the balcony, where the air was quieter, clearer. Beautifully done, came a voice behind me. I turned. Dad, He looked proud, really proud, not just business proud, like a man who'd finally seen the reflection of his legacy in someone better. You didn't go for their throats, he said. I didn't need to, I replied. They're choking on their own guilt. He smirked faintly, then reached into his pocket and handed me a velvet box. Inside was a small pin, our family crest. You've earned it, he said, not by being a Devereux, but by being Alina. For a second, I couldn't speak, because all my life, I thought I had to fight for that name. Turns out, I just had to prove who I really was. I walked back inside, head high, and as I passed Brooke, her lips trembling, eyes full of tears she refused to let fall, I leaned in and whispered, I don't hate you. She flinched. But I hope one day, you hate the version of yourself that tied someone to a pole just to feel powerful. And I left her there, not as a victim, not as a villain, but as a warning. A week later, everything had settled. The scandal had cooled, but the impact hadn't. I was now an official board member. Media outlets ran headlines like, Billionaire's daughter launches national anti-bullying initiative after viral video fallout. But I didn't do it for the press. I did it for the girl who once stood tied to a pole, surrounded by laughter. And I did it for everyone who never had the strength or a voice to fight back. Then came the letter. From Brooke. Handwritten. Shaky handwriting. Tear-stained edges. You didn't ruin me, Alina. You revealed me. I've lost everything, but maybe I needed to. I don't expect forgiveness. But I am sorry. Deeply. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote one line in return. Deal. That's all I want for both of us. And sent it back. No threats. No public humiliation. Just closure. 2 days later, I sat in the kitchen with Marta, the maid who had once handed me a sandwich when I'd skipped dinner after the gala. I looked her in the eyes and said, I'm covering your medical bills. And your son's college tuition. She gasped, hand covering her mouth. Why? I smiled softly. Because when the world laughed at me, you didn't. And I never forget kindness. That night, I walked onto the terrace of the Devereux estate. The city lights shimmered beneath me. For a long time, I just stood there breathing it in. I wasn't just the girl they'd tied to a pole anymore. I was the woman who rose from it. Stronger. Kinder. Unstoppable. They thought they were mocking me. But all they did was light a fire. And now, I was the flame.